The next stitch I want to share with you is called Herringbone stitch or Ndebele stitch. And this is a pretty versatile way of fixing beads. It also works up fairly quickly because, as you can see, it's a stitch where the beads are less densely packed than in peyote. And so it means you're just working up more of a space with less beads. It's pretty versatile. For example, for this one here, this is a peacock pattern. The fabric is pretty much straightforward, nothing fancy going on, all the same Delica beads, but the real attraction here is by actually using a pattern. And so you have different color beads that actually paint a picture, if you will. And in this case, it's kind of the central part of a peacock feather. You can also vary up the bead shapes that you're using. For example, this one here is using a variety of triangle beads. And you can see these are kind of colored bands that move upwards. And the interest in this particular texture is really provided by the fact that the triangles sometimes show their front tips and sometimes their broad back sides. And so it's kind of more of a chunky type feel as well. For this one here, we've actually combined two different bead sizes. So the interest here is from the fact that we mixed 15 size beads with 11 size beads. We also added a Peyote Edge, which kind of provides an additional ripple on the side. And so for this one, it's basically a bead enclosure bead right there with a little bit of a focal bead. You have something that's looking very organic. And so this combines different colors with the stitch itself and the different bead sizes. So how do you build this particular stitch? Well, the interesting thing is that first of all, you have to build yourself up an anchor row, if you will. And so the way we do that, this is not Ndebele proper. This is just a way to get yourself started. We thread a bead, we go through it again. And a second time just to make sure that it holds fast. And then I'm going to build myself a row of beads that are actually sitting side by side. Incidentally, this is also a really great starter row for brick stitch. If you have something that you don't want to build up from a triangle shape going outwards, but you want to build up with a basic row already going. So we pick up a second bead. I'll go right back from the bottom to the top, the old bead, and place it side by side and go back down. So these are sitting side by side now. And so for brick stitch, I would actually have here my anchor thread, but I don't want that right now. I really just want to put another bead in place. Again, from the top to the bottom. Bottom to the top. And there you have it. There's another one sitting side by side. And again, from the top, from the bottom to the top, and from the top to the bottom. So you always vary. You can see I have two threads here, two threads there, two threads here, two threads there. So it's kind of alternating. And I can keep going on this as long as I want until I have the kind of length that I am happy with. There we go. The only thing you have to work with Ndebele is because you are using even pairs of beads, you always need to have an even number of beads in your bottom row. So let's go with one more. And that will give us 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs. And I think that will be enough to show what we have in mind. All right, there we go. So in this case, I'm coming out at the bottom, but of course I need to build my next row on top of here. So I'm just going to flip this over. Doesn't really make a difference, no big deal. And I'm going to pick up my first row. So again, this was just to create the basic. This has nothing to do with Ndebele. This could also be a really great starter row for brick stitch. That's just how you put a lot of beads side by side with those kind of supporting threads between them. Now this is the first real row of Ndebele. And I kind of said that this was working up fairly fast. And here's why. You always stitch 2 beads at a time. Always 2 beads. So that's already making it quicker than peyote. So you come out this bead here, right there. You stitch 2 beads, you go down from this bead and you fasten the 2 beads on the top. And now you can kind of see why this stitch is called herringbone, which is kind of like, you know, the bones sticking off of the back of a fish, because they're kind of sitting at right angles to each other. And so this is going to give you kind of this idea of when you're looking at a skeleton of a fish where all the ribs are kind of sitting like that. And that's how they nestle on top of each other. So now I'm at the bottom, which of course I don't want to be. So I'll go up to the next pair, go up to the top, pick up 2 beads, go down again in the next one. So again, I have a pair of beads sitting on top of my bottom row. I'll do this one more time. Again, 2 beads, go down. So this is working out pretty fast. Now I've got 1 more right there, 2 more, and down. All right, and that's my first row of ndebele. So there they are, all sitting kind of at right angles. And I'm going to sew this into the fabric if I have a couple more rows, you know, so I'm just going to leave that hanging for now. So what I need to do now is I want to go and start my next row. So I'll go and thread up through my last bead. And now I'm ready to start my next row. So let's say we're going to go back with black. Maybe that's going to make better contrast. So now you can see how you fasten an ndebele row, not to the starter row, but to itself. You go right up through here, go into this bead and come out the other, and you can kind of manage that in one go. So see what I'm doing here? I'm going in through this bead, coming out through the next pair, and there they are, little fish bones sitting on top of the last fish bones. There. I'm going to do the same thing, 2 beads sitting on top of this pair, and I'm going to go into the next pair. There. And again, 2 beads, top of this pair, going out the next pair. There we go. And again, 2 beads. There. And that's my second row. So you have this fan out a little bit. Eventually it's going to get back once you start pulling the rows in from the next row, but you always have a little bit of a gathering from the bottom row into when you go into the pattern. So now if I want to build up my next row, I have to go up here, back through my last threaded pair. There we go. And let's go with the blue row again. So again, 2 blue, in one pair, out the other. In one pair, out the other. In one pair, oops, I meant to take blue ones. Out the other. And here is my last pair. There we go. And again, I'm going to go right back up through here and start my next row. Now, one thing I can do if I want to is actually set an accent. So that's completely optional. So I'll actually pick up 1 bead while I'm going up here. So I could go and stitch this in place. And that's sometimes interesting if you like wanted to put an accent bead on it, you know, and kind of see that the edges kind of have a little bit more of an interest. And so let me show you that on the other one as well. So again, we're going to go with a black row, in and out. In and out. More in and out. In and out. There we go. And so again, I could actually decide I wanted to have an accent bead, so I'll pick up a blue one to kind of correspond with the blue row over here, and I'll stitch that before I go 1 row up. And you can see they're kind of asymmetrical, you know, one over here, one over there, but it's a way to kind of maybe add a little bit of interest or make the edges more interesting. But basically you just keep building up what you're doing, you know, and again, you can put patterns in there. It doesn't have to be just row by row until you have something like this. So you can see I started here, you know, this was kind of my initial row, and then I started putting the beads on top of each other. So you're working this from this side all the way over to the other side, and you basically work in your pattern, or in this case you work in your different bead sizes and you go back and forth. So again, this would be my starter row, and then I continue going up and up and up. And again, for this one here, for this one actually you can see how the accent beads on the side work, those little ones sticking out right there, they correspond to these sticking out, see? So you have a little bit more of a variegated edge, and you have less of the thread showing as well as you take your turns and move from one row to the other. And again, you started over here, no, and then you basically just work your way up and up and up and around until you have the kind of length that you want. So Ndebele is really good for kind of making strips of beads. You can't really go kind of circular like you did with brick. You can't really expand and contract like you did with peyote stitch, but it's an attractive stitch, and it even allows you to use loom patterns which have beads sitting side by side, and you don't actually need a bead loom. So this one, for example, is really a loom pattern of a peacock feather, and the beads are sitting side by side, not kind of offset like they would in peyote. So if you had something that was a really cool cross stitch pattern, or you had something that was a really cool bead loom pattern, but you don't want to brag out your bead loom and have a lot of thread going on and, you know, this whole kludgy loom thing going on, Ndebele is a really great way to repurpose those patterns and be able to still create something that's just a needle and a thread.